What's cracking, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. New video. I get asked, or I've been asked over the years, my opinion. What is the craziest prison in the California Department of Corrections? What is the craziest institution? And the first thing I want to say is this. For those of you that are from out of state or other countries, San Quentin and Folsom are never going to be on the list. Back in the days, 60s, 70s, 80s, San Quentin and Old Folsom, those were the heavy hitters. That's where everything was happening. But since the 90s, those prisons have been minimum security because there were too many blind spots, meaning areas where people could do stuff to people without the cops being able to cover it with a gun. So in the mid to late 80s into the 90s, California started building these prisons that were called 180 design level 4, which is the most maximum security prisons in California. And then you have level 4 270s. And all that means is how much of the day room, how many degrees there are to the day room, right? So a 270, A section can see C section, A section can see B. All the sections can see each other. In a 180 design prison, there's a wall in between each section. You cannot see the other section. It's more secured, it's more restrictive, and there's less movement. So that's the main thing. Now, in 1986, I believe it was, the first level 4 180 was built, which was Tehachapi. When they built it, there was some flaws in the design. That's why it's the only 180 built the way it is. The rotunda, where the showers are and all that, it's a death trap, okay? Then you had in 1987, New Folsom was built. 1988, Corcoran was built. 1989, Pelican Bay was built. Okay, and then you had 1995, Salinas Valley was built, and then 1996 you had 1996 was High Desert. 1992, I believe, was Calipatria. These are all the most serious level 4, 180, and 270 design prisons in the state. Now, when answering the question or even trying to answer the question of which prison is the craziest, I have to say I can't answer that question. And I don't think anybody, if they're being unbiased, because, you know, there's dudes that have been, they've done the majority of their time in one place and they want to say that's the craziest. The majority of the time, my prison term was spent in between Pelican Bay and New Folsom. And I'm going to go ahead and try to break it down for you. Pelican Bay is notorious, extremely well known, but the majority of the title they had was because of the shoe and who was in it. You had all the leaders of the Big Four were in there, all the leadership. And then you had all the guys across the state that were putting in work. They were being sent there. And so the shoe was an extremely high-powered spot, Pelican Bay shoe. I talked about there was a period of about 12 to 13 months where I believe 13 people were killed in the shoe. And then they started single selling, and then it became to where dudes would have to catch each other on the tier. The cops would play the game. They'll pop the doors, and, you know, dudes would get on the tier and whack each other. That's different than having somebody in the cell with you where you can take your time and finish the job, right? So Pelican Bay, the main lines, A and B facility were very, very serious places. 80 to 90% of that yard, at least for the Mexicans, the guys out there were tipped up, as we say. They were connected. They had juice, they had authority, and they had the ability to get things done on the streets or inside the walls, right? And most of the 180 yards have that, though. But Pelican Bay, there was always a difference because every inch of the yard was being recorded. And so when somebody got hit on the yard there, believe they were really trying to take your, even if it was a checking, they were going to try to take you out. The reason being, there's no getting away with it. You're on recording. Like, the case is being picked up. You're making a movie. Every time you do a hit on A or B facility in Pelican Bay, you're making a movie. The other yards would only have usually one camera, and a lot of times it was stationary, right? It was. I take that back. New Folsom had one for the squad that they could move around, and then they had the stationary one that was, I believe, facing the PIA door, Prison Industry Authority's door. Work change, right? And I want to say this. In my opinion, it comes down to 3 prisons: New Folsom, High Desert, and Calipatria. Pelican Bay's up there. It is because of the seriousness of the hits, right? But I remember being told by the OGs when I would be, getting my education, my schooling, my history. Back when Old Folsom and San Quentin were the spots, there were way, way, way more stabbings and assaults in San Quentin than there were in Old Folsom. But from everything I was told, if they hit you in Old Folsom, you probably weren't going to survive. San Quentin, you might survive. You might. But in Old Folsom, more than likely, if you got hit there, it was a wrap for you. Okay. So when I'm looking at these 3, and I'll say 4. I'll say 4 prisons that I just mentioned: New Folsom, High Desert, Calipatria, and Pelican Bay. Because New Folsom has been the oldest. Now, we can go back. Tehachapi was the first one. Tehachapi became a funny style yard, right? There's been a lot of murders there. But it became a 50-50 yard before there was even such a thing, right? So that takes them out of the running. And then you have New Folsom was built, and then Corcoran. Corcoran, their 180s, that's where the shoe is. The other yards they have there are actually 270s. So they never were in the running for being considered one of the craziest because their 180s were the shoe. 4A and 4B. Those are 180 yards, right? They just turned them into the shoe. So then you have New Folsom from 1987. It has, I would be willing to bet there have been more people, more lives taken in New Folsom than any other 180 and 270. I would think and be willing to bet Calipatria will be the number 2 when it comes to just sheer violence. That place has a history, a long history of being buck wild. I remember there was a time, at least for the Southerners, for the Southern raza, if dudes came from Calipatria that were holding a leadership position in Calipatria and they caught a case, they caught a shoe and they went to the shoe and they came to New Folsom or Pelican Bay or one of the 180s, a lot of times they'd get hit or they would get a stern verbal that, hey, Holmes, that stuff you were pulling over there, it don't fly here. It's different here. And there were a lot of people who lost their lives or whose lives were taken in Calipat that probably didn't have it coming. There's a lot of that all over the state, right? But I'm saying where people would instigate Hey, Holmes, don't let that vato talk to you like that. And it would be an older cat provoking a youngster. Like, hey, homie, you can't let vatos talk to you like that. Just because they wanted to see the violence. Or they didn't like the youngster and they knew if they pumped him up and he wouldn't smoke the other guy, that youngster's done. You can't do that. It's against the rules. And it had happened. I remember a case happening where the kid actually killed another homie in the school area based off an exchange of words. Didn't tell him, hey, Holmes, I didn't like what you had to say. Holmes, go get your shit. We need to handle that. No, it was, he smoked him right there in the classroom. It was unjustified, uncalled for. And Calipatria, I told the story recently of the shot caller in the ad sag in the hole. And Calipatria had all of the Southerners, 70-something dudes, cell extract because of the size of the cornbread that he got on his tray. And people got hurt. The cops, they're not playing. There's going to be 6 cops. If you're by yourself, there's going to be 6 cops, motorcycle helmet on, a shield guy in the front. They're going to spray that dog shit out of the cell before they go in. They're going to dump all kinds of fucking rubber rounds in there, which are going to hurt, and they're going to bounce all over the cell, beating you up. And then they're going to run in there with their billy clubs and beat the brakes off you. If you have a celly, that means there's 12 of them coming in. People get hurt. That guy got in trouble. You can't just, because of your little bullshit ass cornbread, put everybody at risk. And people got hurt. Southerners got their own blood shed because of another motherfucker's cornbread. So Calipatria has always been a very, very violent place. High desert. High desert, since it opened, very violent. But high desert and Calipatria were always known as kind of like Wild West. Things would be done there. People would make decisions. People in leadership would make decisions to engage in combat or political warfare with other Southerners that they would have been slower to engage in on a 180 yard like New Folsom or Pelican Bay. It happens on those yards, but on those yards, it isn't as quick, and everybody is playing chess. Everybody's putting the right places, the things in the right places, right people, the right words. People are setting people up. The other guys that they're in conflict with is watching and countering, like, orale, this vato thinks he's going to set me up like this. Boom, they're setting their own traps. It's a cold game. So I can't answer the question, but I can say this. I believe when it comes to sheer violence, number of lives viciously taken, I would rank New Folsom number 1. I would rank Calipatria number 2. The number 3 spot. Between High Desert and and Pelican Bay, it's hard to say. High Desert has had a lot of riots. Pelican Bay hasn't had a lot of riots because the way who's there, how the communication is handled. High Desert was more, fuck them, let's just run it. Let's just see what happens. And a lot of those dudes, like I said, they get hit for their stupid, petty decision. Bullying ways, you know. But that's my video for today, man. Those of you that have been to these other joints, leave a comment. Because I already know a lot of dudes are going to say High Desert. And I'm just factoring in how long New Folsom has been open and just how many lives have been taken there. And they've had the 1989 and the 1996 riots in New Folsom were humongous. Like, the one in 96 lasted 31 minutes. I remember the cops saying that they had completely lost control of the prison to the Southern Mexicans. That the Southern Mexicans had complete control of a CDC facility for 31 minutes, and it freaked them out. So I'm interested to see what people have to say. And I know a lot of people from other places, other countries are blown away that it's not going to be San Quentin and Old Folsom. But like I said, since the 90s, they've been a minimum, I believe 94, they've been minimum security prisons. Things changed. But that's my video for today, man. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Everybody, please be safe, be smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them. I'm out of here.